So just recently I made my first successful bow. But now I only have one more problem. I only have 3 arrows left. About 7 years ago or so, I bought some hickory arrows from a guy who unfortunately doesn't make them anymore. But these ones here, these are all broken in some way, and the only 3 I have left is actually his. But I love these arrows. They're really strong and durable. They have hit rocks and trees and even hit other arrows with them, and they just hold up really well. So a few years back, I cut some ash logs down to length for this very occasion, and I'd like to use those and try those out for my own arrow builds. And I've never done it before. I've only read up on it. So I think this is a perfect opportunity for me to try it out for myself. So there's some tools that would make this job a little easier. Using something like a froe or a big knife would really help speed this along. But recently I purchased too many tools, and my wife has put me on tool probation, so I'm stuck with what I got. And right now it's a hatchet, but it still gets the job done. Just takes a few more steps to do it.
Is that all of them?
But it still gets the job done. Just takes a few more steps to do it. During the process of making these, I split the log out with my hatchet and a mallet, and then I got them down to 1 inch or 2 inch splits, depending on the knots and that in it. And what I would do from there is take the axe and trim them up, because you're going to have a lot of waste on those splits. And then after that, with my limited tool selection, that's kind of like, and I don't want to use power tools, I want to do this all by hand. I went to the draw knife and tried that out, and that worked pretty good. I got them squared off with that as best I could, making a square like dowel, and kept reducing it. Now sometimes when you ran into a knot though, and I ran into a grain runoff, it became very hard to keep it straight. I would be carving away on them and spend 20 minutes or 40 minutes on some of them, when I was using the draw knife and grab a knot and tear out and even break some of the shafts as they were getting close to the dimensions I was looking for. So I was trying to go to a 3/8 inch dowel like this. And on the process of getting there, I was getting really close and it just snapped. And all that time and work into that one just kind of went out the window. So then I would have to even go to the rasp on a few of them, which caused way more time and problems than I would have liked. But it still reduced it down to roughly the 3/8 diameter that I wanted. After the draw knife, if I could get it down to the 3/8, I would use a hand plane. I use this hand planer here. It's the only one I have, and it did pretty good, but you still have tear out because a lot of these had runoff grain in them or not, and they would just snag it and have a lot of tear out. And you get this thin, it begins to break and crack, and I ruined a few just doing that. A smaller hand plane would have been better, but right now it's all I have. So it worked pretty good to get to the 3/8, and I use this jig here that I made. It's a 3/8 notch, so once I got it to square in that corner, and then I would also use these holes for when I went down to shaping the arrow, they would have to fit. I got a little bit bigger hole here and a 1/11/16 size hole there. Is roughly the size I wanted finished for the arrow shaft. The hand plane worked good for making it square, and then I put it in this jig here that I made, and all I did was just make a V trough, and then that square arrow shaft would sit in there like that, and that way a corner would be up like that, and I would set it against the board and then take the hand plane and do a few passes along each corner. And then I would have basically an octagon, and this big of a hand plane became almost too hard to do it after you shaved the 4 corners and became 8. It became too complicated to do the 8. So what I resorted to was, I was thinking about a knife, but I resorted to these scrapers instead. This one I started out with the curve, but then this gooseneck scraper I actually really liked, and I actually got a little bit of a burr here, and that actually worked pretty good for trimming off those edges to get it fairly round. So I would use that in the vise and then get it to the point where I could sand it and smooth it out best I can until I fit it in that jig hole of roughly 11/16. Some of them have a taper in them that I intentionally and non-intentionally put in. But at this point, I'm going to work on knot and then work on fletching them and also work on notching them out for the broadheads. And we'll see how that all turns out. So I fletched my first 2 arrows off camera because I wanted to kind of get a hands-on feel for what it was going to be like going into it. For instance, like just the prep work for it was a lot of work, hours of work in prepping, from getting the hide glue ready and mixed and heated up to the sinew smashed and tore into little pieces, and even getting the feathers split and ground down, which was way longer than I thought it was going to take. Because in the book I was reading, it was saying that they use power tools to grind down the quills, but you can do it by hand. And that's where I realized, oh my word, that is a lot more work than I thought. Because, I mean, just to do 3, I think it took over an hour trying to figure out how to hold the quill, how to sand it, and without ripping it. And it was just time consuming, the whole process. So definitely can see why Fletcher and Boyer were 2 separate careers back in the day, because it's just a lot of work just to make a simple arrow, which you come to respect once you do it, especially the primitive way of using sinew and hide glue and pine pitch to mount everything, and trying to put these feathers on was fun with 2 hands when you actually need 4. You know, it's just a ton of work. Like, for instance, part with the sinew, I had the whole tendon there, and I would put it in water, and I remember, I think you have to break it down by chewing it. So I almost put the whole tendon right in my mouth and started chewing it. And, but I was like, I just don't seem right, because it's been a few years since I last researched that. And what I realized, it came to me finally after a half hour of that tendon soaking in water, it loosened up a little bit, but it wasn't to the stage that I thought it should be. And it hit me. I was like, oh yeah, you're supposed to smash it dry and pull it apart into these little tiny threads like this. I was like, oh, I'm really glad I didn't stick the whole tendon in my mouth and start chewing it. When it came down to putting the fletchings on, I learned from the book, put your first fletching on, wrap the sinew twice around it to hold it in the position roughly where you want it. Put on your next fletching, tie more around that one, probably around 2 or 3 times, and do that with their 3rd feather. So that way, it'll at least hold the back of the fletching down. And then the front part, you repeat the same process. But my first arrow, I got done. I was just proud that it was done. I just kind of want to get these arrows fletched and done out of the way so that I can shoot them and just see how they perform. And hopefully down the road, get better and better at it. So I'm sure they're not perfect at all. 120 degrees is what you're supposed to get all the way around, but I'm sure they're off a decent amount. But for right now, I have 9 arrows total. In the shaft making process, I broke 2 or 3 more. I had a dozen at one point. So I'm down to 9, and I'm kind of grateful for that because I don't really want to do 12 of these. Plus, I don't think I even have enough material. So a lot has been learned already. I am grateful for the knowledge, but I'm also exhausted and need counseling after all this. I just got done shooting my arrows. Some of them turned out pretty good. They shot well, some of them not so well. Some of it was probably me, but either way, I'm really happy I did it. It was worth it, and I'm glad to be at the end of it. But it's pretty cool to make a bow and then make your own arrows and shoot them together and see how they perform. So that was pretty cool, pretty exciting. 3 years ago, I cut those logs and have been wanting to do this ever since, but life just kind of got in the way and got busy. I'm glad and privileged to have this time to be able to do it. Now going forward, I want to get better, and I think I got an idea of something that might help.